Somewhere right now, infrastructure teams at major tech companies are frantically redrawing their data center plans. Why? Because New York, the most influential tech state in America, just shut the door on new mega data center construction. Starting now, no new large-scale data centers can be built in New York State until regulators can prove the power grid can handle them. This is a moratorium, and it's the first of its kind in the United States. Here's why it matters. Data centers are the invisible engines running every single AI service you interact with. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, every image generator, every language model, they all need a physical building to live in. And these aren't small buildings. One mega data center can pull as much electricity as a city of 100,000 people. When you multiply that across dozens of facilities all racing to build, the math gets scary fast. New York ran those numbers and realized its power grid is already at capacity. The state was already struggling to keep the lights on during peak hours, and then the AI boom hit. Every major company wanted to build their good infrastructure, proximity to financial markets, reliable connectivity. But those power demands were going to break the system. So the state did something unprecedented. They hit pause on all new mega data center construction. And that's where it gets interesting. So why did New York do this now, instead of years ago? The answer is power demand grew faster than anyone predicted. For decades, New York's data centers were small and scattered. They served financial companies, media platforms, web hosting, manageable loads on aging infrastructure built in the 1950s and 60s. But starting around 2020, everything changed. Cloud computing exploded. Streaming services expanded. Then AI arrived like a tidal wave. Suddenly, every major tech company wanted to build mega data centers in New York. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta, OpenAI, they all had plans. Why? Because New York has massive competitive advantages. Fiber optic cables run under the streets connecting to financial markets and global infrastructure. For traders losing thousands of dollars on millisecond delays, latency is everything. Same calculus applies to serving billions of AI API calls. But here's the problem: New York's electricity infrastructure wasn't ready. The power grid was built for a completely different economy. Sure, it's been upgraded over the decades, but nothing prepared it for AI data centers, each one demanding power like a small city. The state started getting urgent warnings from utility companies. Conversations shifted from accommodating these companies to something more existential. How does the state survive if all these projects go forward? That's when the alarm bells really started ringing. So what exactly is this moratorium? It bans new large-scale data center construction while the state figures out if the power grid can handle more growth. It applies specifically to mega data centers, the kind with massive power draws that represent serious infrastructure load. The state is using this pause period to study the grid, determine exactly how much additional capacity exists, and calculate what infrastructure upgrades would actually be needed to support future data center growth. This is temporary, not permanent. The big question is how long temporary actually means. Weeks, months, years? Nobody knows yet, which creates massive uncertainty for companies that had New York on their expansion roadmap. Companies now face hard decisions. They can wait out the moratorium and hope for approval later, or they can change plans to other states actively courting data centers: Virginia, Texas, Arizona. Those states are offering tax incentives, fast-track permitting, and cheap power. It's a competitive game, and the companies with flexible timelines will just move. The real tension is that other states are watching this play out closely. If New York's moratorium works and the grid stays stable, more states might follow. If the moratorium hurts New York's economy while other states capture the data center boom, New York might regret the decision. Either way, the moratorium is already reshaping where hundreds of millions of dollars in infrastructure investment actually goes. Let's talk specifics. Which companies are actually affected by this? Several data center projects across New York suddenly face major uncertainty. Some are from major cloud providers like Google and Amazon, others from AI startups. All were racing to expand in New York, and now they are stuck. For major companies like Google and Microsoft, this is annoying but manageable. They run data centers across dozens of locations worldwide. Shifting capacity to Northern Virginia or Arizona costs money and time, but it's completely doable. They have options. Smaller AI companies hit much harder. They targeted New York specifically for its infrastructure, fiber optics, and proximity to financial markets. Moving to Texas or Arizona introduces latency trade-offs that actually matter for their service. For latency-sensitive applications, 50 extra milliseconds between East Coast and West Coast can be significant. Beyond raw infrastructure, New York had another huge appeal: talent density. The best AI engineers gravitate toward cities committed to being AI infrastructure hubs. A moratorium sends a clear signal: this state isn't fully committed to being an AI powerhouse. The cryptocurrency industry is also affected. Crypto data centers were planning expansion in New York, and now they are locked out. Some will wait. Some will relocate to states like Texas, which is aggressively courting crypto and AI infrastructure companies with tax incentives and subsidies. Here's the context. How does New York's approach compare to how other states actually handle tech regulation? Most states have been extremely permissive with data center development. They see it as pure economic development: good jobs, tax revenue, infrastructure investment. States compete aggressively to attract these facilities by cutting taxes, streamlining permitting, and sometimes even subsidizing power costs. Texas has aggressively courted data centers for years. Virginia hosts massive data center clusters near Washington, D.C. These states saw the data center boom as unambiguous upside: bring in the investment, collect the taxes, let the market figure it out. New York's approach is fundamentally different. The state is essentially saying, grid stability and long-term sustainability matter more than short-term investment. That's a completely different calculation than most states make. The risk is real, though. Get a reputation as hostile to data center development, and companies will just build elsewhere. New York might lose tax revenue and job creation, while Texas and Virginia capture the entire boom. That's a genuine economic trade-off. But here's what other states are realizing. They have the same problems New York faces. California experiences rolling blackouts from power grid strain. Texas experienced catastrophic grid failures a few years ago. Every state is starting to have this conversation. How do we balance economic growth with actual grid stability? The question isn't whether other states will follow, it's when. So what happens next? What does this moratorium actually mean for the industry and for other states right now? Immediately, you'll see companies shifting plans. Some projects will move to Texas, Virginia, Arizona, Ohio, or anywhere with faster permitting and willing local governments. Some companies will wait and hope the moratorium lifts before their expansion window closes. Investment money flows to wherever it's welcome, and right now, other states are very welcoming. This creates precedent. Once one state enacts a moratorium, others become more likely to follow. California faces its own power pressures from data centers competing with residential users for electricity. As that conversation heats up in Sacramento, expect similar regulatory moves on the West Coast. Data center investment probably doesn't leave the United States. It just spreads more evenly across states that want them. Texas gets a bigger share of new projects. Arizona booms from cheap renewable power. Virginia stays dominant as the East Coast infrastructure hub. New York's competitive advantage weakens significantly. The state was where you built to serve the entire Northeast. That advantage just got much weaker. Companies will spread data centers across multiple regions instead of concentrating them in New York. During this moratorium period, New York can upgrade transmission lines, build new power plants, or invest in renewable energy infrastructure. The goal is eventually supporting data center growth while keeping the grid stable. But here's where things get complicated. If you run a data center company or depend on their infrastructure, what do you do right now? First, wait and see. How long does the moratorium actually last? Days, weeks, years? Until that clarity comes, major commitments are risky. Second, if your expansion timeline is flexible, change plans to other states. Virginia, Texas, Arizona, Ohio, they're actively courting data center projects right now. Faster permitting, lower taxes, cheaper power. Companies are already negotiating new locations. Third, if you have projects deep in New York's planning process, work with regulators directly. Established large companies with local operations are arguing for exemptions or fast-track review processes. Success depends on political relationships and the state's commitment to the moratorium itself. Fourth, diversify geographically. Don't bet everything on New York anymore. Build data center portfolios across multiple states. If one state tightens regulation, you still have capacity elsewhere. Geographic redundancy just became a survival strategy. Fifth, invest in power efficiency aggressively. Data centers using less electricity become more attractive to power-constrained states. Efficiency innovation might become a real competitive advantage during this infrastructure-constrained era. Sixth, renegotiate customer contracts. If you promised New York-based latency requirements, you might need to update those agreements. Customers should expect pricing changes if expensive multi-region build-outs are suddenly necessary. The companies winning right now are those nimble enough to change quickly. So what does New York's data center moratorium mean when you zoom out and look at the bigger picture? It's a signal that the era of unrestricted infrastructure growth might be ending. For the past decade, the general rule was, companies build where it's profitable, states compete with tax breaks, and nobody seriously questions whether the underlying infrastructure can actually handle the load. New York just broke that pattern. State is saying, stability matters more than short-term growth right now. That's a big change. For AI specifically, this is crucial because AI infrastructure is becoming a bottleneck. You can have brilliant models and powerful algorithms, but without physical data centers to run them on, it doesn't matter. Every AI company needs infrastructure, and suddenly that infrastructure is becoming scarce and regulated. This reshapes where companies build over the next few years. Some states copy New York's caution. Others double down on welcoming data centers to capture migration. You end up with a patchwork of different regulatory environments, some permissive, some restrictive, and companies have to navigate that complexity. The core takeaway, we are moving from an era where tech infrastructure just appears wherever companies want it, to an era where states actively manage infrastructure as a scarce resource. That change affects everyone using AI services. The infrastructure race is getting real, and the rules are changing fast. Follow for daily AI news. This story's just getting started.